Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right in. Today we're exploring this quiet, almost invisible friction that happens when lifelong religious devotion collides head-on with sudden, unavoidable doubt. We generally think of faith as this steady, unwavering rock, right? But what happens when the human mind, which craves consistency, gets caught between a deeply ingrained belief system and a lived reality that completely contradicts it? Well, today we're going to unpack the fascinating psychology behind this hidden struggle and look at how it impacts individuals, leaders, and even entire institutions. Picture this. You've got someone, maybe a devoted monk or a nun, who took their vows decades ago. I mean, they were all in, dedicating every waking moment to this life. But now, after all those years, imagine the heavy, profound weight of finding themselves privately questioning the very teachings they once accepted as absolute truth. That quiet gap between what they believed with total certainty and what they're noticing now, it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a super powerful psychological phenomenon. And it has a name. Cognitive dissonance. Psychologist Leon Festinger theorized that when our beliefs and our lived experiences pull us in totally different directions, the mind feels real, palpable discomfort. And here is the really fascinating part. To resolve that intense discomfort, the human mind doesn't always choose to face the truth. Instead, it often takes the easier road. It tries to resolve the friction by changing the internal story rather than facing an uncomfortable reality. Now, we all experience cognitive dissonance in small ways all the time. But in religious life, the stakes are just staggeringly high. We're talking vows, community, identity, purpose, and decades of service. A whole life has been built around these beliefs being true. So when evidence points to something uncomfortable, questioning those beliefs threatens a person's entire structure of self. It doesn't just feel like a change of mind, it literally feels like their whole existence is unraveling. It's like a giant scale. On one side, you have the heavy weight of a life's investment. I have given my life to this order. On the other side, there's this emerging, undeniable reality. I'm not sure I believe this specific teaching anymore. Putting these two thoughts side by side creates intense inner conflict. They just can't easily coexist, and the mind is backed into a corner, absolutely demanding a resolution to the tension. So when faced with this immense pressure, people generally resolve it in one of three ways. First, they might suppress the doubt and outwardly recommit, just forcefully pushing the questions down. The second option is quietly separating their public devotion from their private questioning, which is basically living two different versions of the same life. And the third, which is often the most painful but deeply authentic path, is to finally let the doubt grow until it forces an honest, life-altering reckoning. Let's move on to part 1, the leadership trap and how leaders act as guardians of tradition. When we shift our focus upward to leadership, this psychological burden gets so much heavier. Think about a leader who has spent years upholding a specific rule. Suddenly, new information shows that this exact rule is causing harm. The dissonance here is absolutely massive. Admitting that the practice needs to change isn't just admitting a simple error. To the leader, it feels like invalidating their entire legacy. It feels like admitting their life's work was built on shaky ground. So, instead of changing the harmful practice, the leader instinctively moves to justify it. You'll hear things like, well, this has always been our way. Tradition exists for a reason. And what's vital to understand here is that these leaders aren't necessarily being intentionally deceitful. They genuinely believe what they are saying. But underneath it all, their mind is working overtime to protect something incredibly fragile, their identity as a rightful, righteous leader. Which brings us to part 2, when institutions double down. What happens when this defensiveness scales up to a whole organization? Well, when a crisis hits, organizations often fall into a deeply damaging trap. The instinct to protect the institution's image quietly overrides the instinct to protect the very people the institution was created to serve. The dissonance forces the organization to view the survival of its public image as exactly the same thing as the survival of its holy mission. This kind of sounds like a major corporation defending a failing business strategy, right? But the context changes everything. Unlike a corporation doubling down to protect its bottom line, when a religious institution doubles down and chooses silence to protect its image, the devastating cost is measured in real, visceral human suffering, not lost revenue. Leon Festinger's research hit the nail on the head here. He found that the stronger the challenge to a belief, the harder the mind works to defend it. This is exactly why you'll often see the most rigid, aggressive defensiveness in these communities peaking exactly when the evidence against a practice is at its absolute strongest. It's not just stubbornness. It is the mind desperately fighting to protect an entire identity built completely around being right. We've spent time breaking down the mechanics of this trap, seen how dissonance works in the shadows of our minds. But, so what? What does this all mean? How can members and leaders apply these psychological insights to navigate this internal friction in a healthy way? Let's break down a few actionable takeaways. Let's start with the members. It is crucial to notice the difference between true faith and mere suppression. True faith can hold uncertainty. Suppression just can't. Plus, doubt is not automatically a failure of devotion. Actually, a lot of deep spiritual traditions encourage questioning. Finally, watch out for the sunk cost fallacy. If you're holding on to a belief just because you've given years of your life to it, recognize that that is cognitive dissonance talking, not necessarily the truth. And for the leaders, the responsibility is heavy, for sure. You have to actively build communities that are safe enough for members to express doubt without being shamed. You've got to do the really hard work of separating sacred traditions from your own personal ego. When you feel a sharp, intense defensiveness rising up, treat that as a giant signal that real change might be needed. And above all, you must protect people over the institution's reputation, every single time. That last point is super important. When a crisis happens, the natural instinct to protect the institution first feels incredibly right in the moment. It feels like devotion. But we have to see it for what it truly is. It's not true loyalty. It is simply the mind's desperate attempt to reduce cognitive dissonance, basically wearing the mask of loyalty just to avoid facing an uncomfortable reality. Ultimately, it all boils down to this fundamental tension. Religious orders are built on the premise that truth matters more than comfort. Yet, as we've seen, cognitive dissonance is this powerful, invisible force tempting every single person and every institution to take the easier road, to choose protecting their comfort over the messy pursuit of truth. Recognizing this pull toward comfort isn't a betrayal of belief. Honestly, it might be the most faithful thing a person can do. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. When you're faced with this quiet internal friction in your own life, are you bravely pursuing the truth? Or are you simply choosing comfort dressed up as loyalty, tradition, or faith? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.